One of the changes that Apple introduced with Lion is that its FileVault encryption solution has been completely revamped, changing it from encryption that primarily protected your home folder to encryption that now protects your whole boot volume. Despite the common name, the two solutions are very different beasts. Now, if you've used the older FileVault, be aware that everything you know about it has changed in Lion. And since Apple has dubbed the new encryption as FileVault 2, I'm going to be referring to the older FileVault as FileVault 1 during this talk. So to understand where FileVault 2 is going, it's a good idea to take a look back at how FileVault 1 works. At its heart are encrypted disk images. Encrypted disk images are just like any other disk image, except that they are password protected and they're encrypted with AES encryption. As long as you know the passphrase, you can use them like you would any other disk image. Now, FileVault 1 took that same encrypted disk image technology and used it to protect one particular folder, and that's your account's home folder. How FileVault 1 did this was by creating an encrypted disk image that's able to grow or shrink with the amount of data that you have stored in your home folder, mounting that encrypted disk image when you logged in, and then unmounting it when you logged out. And it just basically encrypts and decrypts your data as it comes in and out of your home folder on the fly. Now, FileVault 1 had some upsides and downsides. The biggest upsides were that it used strong encryption. It used AES 128 in 10.3 and 10.4, and it used AES 256 in 10.5 and 10.6. And it came with OS 10, so you're getting it for the same price that you paid for your operating system. And Apple went to a considerable amount of trouble to make sure that you hardly noticed anything different about working in an account that's encrypted from one that wasn't encrypted. Now, the biggest downsides had to do with backups, working with network accounts, and where FileVault 1 was not able to provide whole disk encryption. So with regards to backups, the problem was that FileVault 1 was, at its heart, is using a password-protected disk image. Most backup software was not able to handle backing up the software, backing up the data in the account when the machine was logged out. So the user would need to be logged in while the backup was running. And alternatively, if you were backing up the encrypted disk image itself, you'd have the problem where someone would log in, maybe change a few files, and then log back out. Your backup software didn't see, oh, a few 100K of Word files got changed. It sees, oh, that 100 gig disk image changed again. I now have to back up that whole 100 gigs again. And if you, logged in while the backup is running, it could be even more problematic. Because, if you change the encrypted disk image file while it's being backed up, for example, you log in and start changing things, you can corrupt that backup, and that makes it harder and impossible to restore your files later. And that's one of the reasons why Time Machine in 10.5 and 10.6 would only would only back up your encrypted home folder when you were logged out. So the problem with network accounts combined with FileVault 1 is, again, that FileVault 1 is using a password-protected disk image. The disk image only knows the password that's used to unlock that disk image. So, you forgot your password, and you called the help desk to reset it. That disk image doesn't know you called the help desk. It doesn't know that you changed the password. They changed the password on their end. All it knows is that the password that you're supplying is different than the one it's expecting. So, for example, on 10.4 when this happened, you called the help desk. They changed your password. You'd log in. The login screen would accept it. You'd go to a blue screen. You'd never come out. So on 10.5, Apple did introduce some functionality for helping you update the disk image password as part of the login process, but that relied on you remembering the old password. And if you called the help desk because you forgot your password, what are the chances that you're going to be able to supply it now? So, before Apple put in a way to update that password, pretty much anytime you changed your password, it would have to be from that specific encrypted machine, or you'd have to call the help desk every time you changed your password. Now, Apple did provide a way to reset the encrypted disk image's password by the master password, but this was a solution primarily built for dealing with OS X's own local accounts. Leveraging the master password to help you recover a network accounts that had FileVault to local homes usually required some work on the command line. And on top of all that, the biggest issue for FileVault 1 in a number of corporate and government environments was that, it was not providing whole disk encryption, where everything on the machine, not just in your account's home folder, was protected. FileVault 1's ability to only protect the home folders meant that it automatically failed that requirement, regardless of its other virtues and blemishes. It wasn't doing the job, so a lot of government corporate entities just said no. Now, Apple had known about its customers' problems with FileVault 1 as it was designed, and they went back to the drawing board to provide a full disk encryption solution. Now, ultimately, this would require a complete redesign of FileVault from the ground up, basing the new FileVault 2 on an entirely new type of virtual volume storage, which Apple has named core storage. While you can make unencrypted core storage volumes, its primary use right now in 10.7 is to provide the encrypted storage for FileVault 2. Core storage works on a per partition basis, so you can have both encrypted and unencrypted partitions on the same physical hard drive. Now, FileVault 2 in broad terms, this is the 10,000 foot view looking down from on high. It works like PGP or other full disk encryption solutions available for the Mac. When you start up your system, a small unencrypted partition provides just enough access to provide you with the tools that you need to unlock the much larger encrypted storage, usually through what's called a pre-boot login. If you provide the right authentication at that pre-boot login, the encrypted storage then unlocks, and the OS on the machine, which had been previously locked away on the encrypted storage, then takes over and boots the Mac. Once the Mac is unlocked and booted, the user doesn't have the problems with network accounts or backups that you would have with FileVault 1 because from the OS's perspective, everything it needs to access is accessible. There's nothing password protected or locked away. Now, because not everything about FileVault 2 is obvious at first glance, I want to make sure to cover one of the new less known features in 10.7, and that's the line recovery feature. The general idea is that you can boot from the hidden recovery HD partition on your Mac. You can, once you're booted to it, you have access to all the tools you need to install Lion, repair your disk, or even restore from Time Machine if you need it. So what does this have to do with FileVault 2? Well, FileVault 2 encrypts your boot partition, but your Mac still needs an unencrypted space to boot to and get access to those unlock tools. The recovery partition serves as that needed space. The FileVault encryption process will check to see if recovery HD is there before beginning encryption, and it won't begin it if it's not there. Now, I have heard some folks saying, anecdotally, I didn't have it and FileVault 2 let me do it anyway. That's not what I found in my testing. By and large, what you'll get if recovery HD isn't there is you'll get an error message saying something along the lines of, you're the wrong disk volume or something like that. But what it's really meaning is I can't find recovery HD. Now, I'm going to go through a demo where we're going to go through the process of setting up FileVault 2 with what I'm going to be calling the individual recovery key. And this is a recovery key that your Mac will generate as part of the FileVault 2 encryption process. So the first thing we're going to do is log in. Okay, and next we're going to go to System Preferences. And for there, we're going to go to Security and Privacy. Select FileVault. And the Turn on FileVault button is grayed out, so we're going to need to go click on that lock and authenticate. Now, something cool happens when we put in our password and hit that unlock. So I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. So, okay, the Turn on FileVault button is now active. And here we're getting the chance to enable users to appear at that pre-boot login screen. But if you notice, there's one user that's already selected. That's the user we're logged in with. How did that happen? Well, when you click that lock and you put in your password to unlock, the FileVault process will actually cache that and pass it around the back to pre-enable that user. And this actually works in another way, where if you have a user who needs to enable themselves, you can if you can get them to the regular login screen and they can log in as themselves, they can do the same thing. Go into System Preferences, click that lock, go in here, they'll be enabled. It's a neat little trick that you may be able to leverage for yourselves. So I need to go ahead and enable that other user, so let's go ahead and do that. Come on, past me. There we go. All right, so I'm going to put in that account's password. Hit OK. Now he's enabled as well. So we're going to go ahead and hit Continue. OK. And this is the individual recovery key. This alphanumeric string is this is going to be your backdoor in the event that your passwords aren't working, nothing else is working, this is your ultimate backdoor. So it's very important that you keep track of this and know what it is. And it's so important that Apple has decided to give you a way to store it with them. So let's go ahead and click on Continue. OK, so you get two options at this point. Store the recovery key with Apple or not. So let's go ahead and take a look at Store the recovery key with Apple. And here you're going to get 3 security questions. Well, you get to choose from the list and set 3 security questions. And it's very important that you remember the exact answers you give to these questions. Because when your recovery key gets sent up to Apple, it's also encoded on their end. And the way to get it out are the answers to these questions. So if you don't remember what you answer, Apple's not going to be able to help you when the time comes. So, very important. Just as important as remembering what your recovery key is the answers to these security questions. So, you know what? It's a demo. I'm going to risk it. I'm not going to store the recovery key with Apple. All right, living on the edge. All right, so hit Continue. And at this point, we're ready to go. So we're just going to hit Restart. And the encryption will begin after one more step that I'll explain in just a second. So we're restarting. And here we are at that pre-boot login screen. As you can see, the 2 accounts that have enabled, they both have icons showing up here. So I'm going to go ahead and select my account and put in my password. And it's at this point that the encryption actually kicks off. That's a fail-safe to make sure that in the event that something happened during the reboot and you didn't get the pre-boot login screen, you're not locked out of your machine. It doesn't actually start until you select an account and tell it, put in your password. So we're back into the FileVault preference pane. And through the magic of the movies, I'm going to make this go much faster. So it's going to be one of those, this is not real world speeds, folks, so don't even think it is. So as you can see, it says FileVault is turned on for the disk Macintosh HD, and it says a recovery key has been set. So everything should be working the way it should be. And once it finishes, it'll just say encryption done. One important thing to know about here is that once you log in at that pre-boot login screen, the encryption will just keep going. You don't have to have system preferences open. Your user can keep working. They may notice some performance hit depending on how fast the processor is, how fast the hard drive is, how much memory they have. But by and large, your user will be able to just keep working during this process. They can put their laptop to sleep. Encryption will pause while it's asleep. It'll pick up when it wakes up. They can restart the machine. It'll just pick up where it left off. By and large, they can just keep working until it finishes. So once you kick off that process, you can they log in, they can just keep working. Now, the chief use of the FileVault 2 individual recovery key is to help you reset your account password in the event that you forget what your password is. Now, to use the recovery key at the pre-boot login screen, you'll enter your password incorrectly 3 times. And after that, the login screen should prompt you for the recovery key. Now, an important thing to note here is that this functionality was built to reset the password of a local account. If you have a network account where your password is being managed by a directory service like Active Directory or Open Directory, resetting your password using this method will likely break the password sync between your account on the machine and your directory service. So in other words, the next time you change your password, the password change likely wouldn't come back down to your Mac. In that event, you'll need to delete and reset up the account on your Mac in order to fix this, but that's kind of a minor price to pay in order to get your data. Now, once you enter the recovery key, FileVault 2 will take you into the regular login window and then prompt you to reset your password. And once the password is reset, the rest of the login process will complete. So that's where we're at right now. We're just typing in our new password. Going to go ahead and hit reset. And there we go. We're passed on through. And when you hit reset password, it's going to update both your account's password. It's also going to update FileVault 2. Everything is going to be in sync after that. Well, maybe your keychain password, but that can have problems anyway. So just for that, in that case, you just need to make sure that you go in, update your keychain password, and just take care of that. Now, for those of you who want to roll out a managed deployment of FileVault 2, deploying and supporting FileVault 2 in a larger Mac environment is almost exactly the same as setting it up for an individual. Now, Apple recognized it would be an administrative headache to track those individual multiple recovery keys. So the sole difference between managed and unmanaged is how the recovery key is generated. That recovery key system is the one single part of FileVault 1 that has survived into FileVault 2. And that sole survivor is FileVault Master.keychain. Just to show of hands, how many folks have used FileVault 1 in their own environments? OK, so you folks are familiar with FileVault Master.keychain? OK. So what does FileVault Master.keychain do? It serves as essentially set backdoor. In the event that you weren't able to get into an encrypted Mac using the usual passwords, you could use FileVault Master.keychain to unlock the encryption and recover the data stored inside. In the FileVault context, Apple historically called this a master password. The master password is in fact the password to a FileVault-specific keychain. So what role does the password you're setting as the master password actually play? It's the password used to secure the FileVault master keychain itself. Because this password is only used to unlock the keychain, the password can be rotated without affecting the contents of that keychain, much like how changing your login password doesn't affect the contents of your login keychain. So what? That's crazy talk. If the master password isn't actually doing the recovery, what is doing the recovery? So once again, FileVault Master.keychain is a FileVault-specific keychain whose only contents are an SSL certificate, which I'm going to be referring to in this talk as the public key, and an accompanying private key. These two keys are specifically used for FileVault certificate-based authentication. And when both keys are available, you can use them to unlock or decrypt FileVault 2's encryption without needing any of the passwords of the accounts authorized to log in at the pre-boot login screen. So that's how the magic works. Basically, your public and private key to do recovery will do certificate-based authentication, hand that off to the encryption will recognize it, and unlock. Now, for those of you who are experienced with a managed FileVault 1 deployment, setting a FileVault 2 recovery key with FileVault Master.keychain is exactly the same as setting it with FileVault 1. In fact, for those following Apple's recommended best practice, you don't need to change anything. Now, quick show of hands. How many people followed Apple's recommended best practice for managed FileVault 1 deployments? 2 people. How many had no idea there was Apple recommended best practice for a FileVault 1 deployment? Yep. OK, the reason I recommended Apple's recommended best practice is that Apple has always recommended escrowing the FileVault private key somewhere outside the encrypted Mac. However, in FileVault 1, you could have both the private and public key inside that FileVault master keychain, and it worked fine. However, in FileVault 2, this recommendation is now a requirement. If FileVault 2 detects both the private and public keys in your FileVault master keychain, it makes the programmatic assumption that this is left over from an older OS, and it ignores it. In this case, it'll default to setting up an individual recovery key. So if you've got a FileVault master keychain, and you put it on a 10.7 machine, and you go to turn on FileVault 2, and it shows you that alphanumeric string and asks if you want to save it with Apple, double check that keychain. So if you do not already have a pre-built FileVault master keychain, you'll need to create one and add it to your machines before encrypting them. Build your keychain by setting the master password on a particular machine and then copying the FileVault master keychain file off of it. At this point, the keychain will contain both the private and public keys needed for FileVault recovery. Now, once you have your keychain, make several copies and store them in a safe place. Now, everybody has a different conception of what safe is, but I actually like an actual safe, steel walls, nice combination lock in the front, or inside an encrypted disk image that is itself stored somewhere secure like a file share that very few people have access to. Now, a new feature as of 10.7.2 is that you can use the security command to create a FileVault master keychain from the command line. And this method creates a 2048-bit private key by default. Now, once you have your copy safely stowed, edit yet another copy of that keychain and remove the private key for use as your FileVault 2 recovery key. This all looks perfectly clear, doesn't it? Yeah, let's go through the process of how this works. Okay, so we're going to go through the procedure of creating a managed recovery key using FileVault Master Keychain. So we're going to log in again. And the first place we're going to go in this case is going to be to terminal. Okay, nice and big. Hopefully everyone can see that in the back. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you where this command is, so by running security help, because this is not in the man page. You don't see this without going to security help. And there it is, down at the bottom, create FileVault Master Keychain. It's got a short and sweet description. Creates a keychain containing a key pair for FileVault recovery use. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to run security, create FileVault Master Keychain. And we're going to stick it in the right place, and we're going to name it the right thing. So we're going to put it in library keychains, FileVault Master.keychain. And because we're using sudo, the first password is to prompt us for our admin password. The next one is going to be for the master password that your institution has agreed on. So you're going to enter it. And it usually says it takes a few minutes, but I've never had it take longer than a couple seconds. So let's go find where I put that. All right, come on past me, go find that thing. Not system, library, okay. Library, keychains, there we go. And the first thing we're going to do is copy that off somewhere secure. So it's on the key recovery drive. So we've got a copy of that somewhere safe. And next thing we're going to do is we're going to go edit that keychain. So we're going to go ahead and run security. Unlock keychain. And we're going to specify library keychains, FileVault Master Keychain. In this case, once again, we're putting in the master password that our institution has agreed on. And if the unlock succeeds, you should just go to the next prompt. So we're all good there. Go to keychain access. There it is up there. And here we have our private and public keys both in here. So as you can see, that's a 2048-bit key. And this is our public key. This is the only thing that should be staying in our keychain on our client machines. As you can see, it's a self-signed SSL certificate. Don't worry about the expiration date. As far as I can tell, that doesn't matter at all. So we're going to go ahead, remove that private key. Going to hit delete. And because this is rather important, it's asking us, are you sure? Yes, we're sure. So, and now our keychain is properly prepared now that we've taken out that private key. So let's lock it back up by running security, lock keychain, then library keychains, FileVault Master Keychain. All right, so it's locked back up. And now that we have a properly prepared managed recovery key, let's go into System Preferences and kick off encryption. So we're going to go click on that lock, put in our password. It's going to do that round the back handoff again. Yep, there we are enabled. Let's go ahead and enable our other user account. And hit continue. And here's the change. We're not getting that, that alphanumeric string. We're just getting something saying a recovery key has been set by your company, school, or institution. That means you have a properly built FileVault Master Keychain on here. And the language is broad enough that it should cover just about anybody, no matter what line of business you're in. And once again, we're not getting the option to store with Apple. So instead, we're just going to go straight to the restart. Okay, so once again, I'm going to select my account, log in. Once I put in my password, encryption is now kicking off. And here we are back in the FileVault preference pane. And if you notice, the wording has changed a little. It says a recovery key has been set, but instead of just saying a recovery key has been set, period, it's saying a recovery key has been set by your company, school, or institution. So that is a good visual cue to let you know, are you using FileVault Master.keychain, or are you using the individual recovery key? If you're using the individual recovery key, it's always going to say a recovery key has been set, period, full stop. If you're using FileVault Master.keychain, it's going to say it's been set by your company, school, or institution. So if you ever have a question, just go take a look. It'll tell you. And once again, that encryption was not real world speed. OK, so once you have your FileVault Master keychain ready, you can take that keychain and deploy it to as many machines as needed. If your worksite mandates password rotation, you can rotate the master password by updating the keychain with the new password and deploying the updated FileVault Master keychain to your Macs. Now, as long as the private and public key on your Macs, as long as the public key on your Macs and the public and private keys in your escrowed recovery keychain stay the same, the password to unlock FileVault Master keychain can be updated as often as needed. Now, that said, I'm going to get on my soapbox a little bit here. There really is no need to rotate the password for the FileVault Master keychain on your client Macs. Here is why. The only thing that is in there is your public key. And the public key is designed so that if you wanted to, you could hand it out at the supermarket. You could post it to a bulletin board. You could email it to everybody on the planet. It is the public key. There is no need to protect it. There is no need to rotate the password protecting it. So I know, for a lot of sites, they're going to be like, well, you need to rotate the password. It's a password. I'm just telling you, it's not needed. But I'm not going to stand in the way of anyone who says, my policy is required. Absolutely, positively, fantastic. Just not needed. So back off my soapbox. Now, I will say, protect the heck out of your recovery keychain. That thing you stuck in the safe, the thing that you stuck in that dark place that no one should ever go, rotate that password, please, if you can. But no need to do it on your client Macs. Now, disaster recovery is something you should plan for when dealing with encrypted machines. After all, these are designed to protect your data against external threats unless properly authenticated. If your OS takes a dive, your normal way of unlocking may no longer work. Now, the first thing you should generally try is the password to one of the authorized accounts. And this applies to both managed and unmanaged FileVault 2 encrypted Macs. So if you have the password to an authorized account, and an authorized account is any of the accounts that shows up at the pre-boot login screen, unlocking or even turning off the encryption is pretty straightforward. You boot to Recovery HD or another boot drive running 10.7, you open Disk Utility, and you either select Unlock or Turn Off Encryption. You'll be prompted for the password of an authorized account, and once again, that's any account that shows up at that pre-boot login screen. You provide it, and you're golden. So let's take a look at how that works. So here we are in Recovery HD. We're going to go to Disk Utility. As you can see, our encrypted disk is locked up. Can't get into it. So we're going to go to Unlock Macintosh HD. We're going to put in our password. And there you go. It's unlocked. You could get now access to the files on the machine. You can do recovery. You can do whatever you need to do. Or if it's just has a small problem, you can run Disk Utility on it now. You can also recover from the terminal, but you'll need a few more pieces of information. The first is to get the logical volume UUID of the drive you want to work on. You can do this by running disutil core storage list, and you can also substitute CS in place of core storage in these commands. Now, once you have the UUID, you can use it to specifically ID the drives that you want to unlock or decrypt. And in this slide, I've highlighted what you should be looking for when looking for the logical volume UUID. You see how it has the tree? The one you want is the one at the bottom, the logical volume with the string after it. And you can either unlock or decrypt using the password of an authorized user using the command shown up on the screen. Now, just keep in mind, like I said, all this is going to be available for download afterwards, so you don't need to try to get these down now. You can also unlock or decrypt using the individually set recovery key using the command shown. This would apply if you're not managing the recovery key and FileVault 2 has generated it for you as part of the encryption process. Now with the managed recovery key, it's a two-step process. First, you'll need to retrieve your keychain that has both your private and the public keys from that, that dark, incredibly guarded place that you put it in. And second, you'll need to unlock that keychain so that the Mac has access to both keys. Now, once you've unlocked the keychain with both the private and the public keys inside, you'll need to run the command shown to either unlock or decrypt the disk. Since FileVault 2 now has access to both keys, you shouldn't need to provide any other passwords. So let's take a look at how that works. So we're going to go in, and in this case, we're not going to disk utility, we're going to go to terminal. I think that needs to be a little bigger. Yep. Okay, let's just shift that over a bit. Thank you. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is make sure we can see our recovery keychain, our FileVault master keychain. So I'm going to go to the key recovery drive. Can I see it? Yep, there it is, FileVault master keychain. So good, we have access to it. That means the Mac and also the encrypted storage can see it. So we're going to run disutil core storage list. And there we go. There's our logical volume UUID. And since I hate typing, I'm going to copy that. Come on. Come on. There we go. Excellent. Thank you, Pass Me. All right, so now that we have the logical volume UUID, next thing we need to do is unlock that keychain. So we're going to run security, unlock keychain, and specify our FileVault master keychain on the key recovery drive. Okay, need to put in our master password here. Got to the next prompt, so everything's good. So now that all that's done, next step, let's unlock that drive. So we're going to run disutil core storage. Need to unlock a volume. I'm going to put in that logical volume UUID. We're going to tell it we're using a recovery keychain. That tells it that we're going to be using FileVault Master.keychain. And then we're going to tell it where FileVault Master.keychain is currently living. So it's on volumes, key recovery, FileVault Master keychain. And enter. Boom, unlocked. So let's just make sure. Let's go take a look in, let's get out of terminal. Let's go to take a look at it in disk utility. And look at that, unlocked, ready to go. So one thing that's appeared as of 10.7.2 is that FileVault is sometimes enabling a guest user at the preboot login screen. Now, when you log in as that guest user, you don't get access to your hard drive. In fact, the only thing you get access to is Safari and a network connection. So why is that even here? Doesn't that seem weird? A secure encryption solution has a guest user? And also, I know someone else out in the audience is running FileVault 2 and says, I don't see that. So why does it appear on some encrypted machines and not others? So long story short, in my opinion, the guest user is a trap for anyone stealing your machine. The guest user at the preboot login screen is a feature tied into signing into iCloud and then enabling Find My Mac. If you don't sign in with iCloud and then enable Find My Mac from that machine, you don't get that guest user login at the FileVault preboot login screen. So basically the idea is this. Someone finds your encrypted machine. Well, I can't log in. Ooh, guest user. I'm going to go to guest user. It's going to try to connect to the first network connection it can find, and it phones home. How fast does it phone home? I left my laptop off for a couple hours, then logged in with the guest user, then checked, find my iPhone, 30 seconds. 30 seconds later, and that probably included the time it took to find a Wi-Fi network, it had phoned home to Cupertino and said, it's right here. So, trap. All right, so just to shift topics a little bit, let's talk about Cauliflower Vest. So aside from having a curious name and an unusual mascot, what is it? Google wanted to use Apple's FileVault 2 encryption for the reasons shown on the screen. It was good, it was free with the OS, and unlike a number of other third-party encryption solutions I won't name, there was a very low probability that a future Apple OS or security update would render the encrypted Mac unbootable. Now, when Google took a look at FileVault 2's capabilities and compared them to their needs, they saw that they would need to build upon FileVault 2's current capabilities. You can monitor, unlock, or decrypt a FileVault 2 encrypted boot drive using command line tools, but you can't start the encryption process from the command line. Instead, the encryption needs to be enabled from System Preferences FileVault Preference pane, which means someone needs to log in, launch System Preferences, all in the GUI, and then kick this off. Another issue has to do with recovery keys. Apple has built in an excellent way to have each Mac generate its own recovery keys. Apple has even built in a secure way for you to call Apple, answer some security questions, and get your recovery key back in the event that you no longer have it. However, the only place you can store your recovery keys in that fashion is with Apple itself. There is no Apple-provided functionality for you to set up your own server for storing those keys. Instead, Apple allows their customers to set up a managed recovery key using FileVault Master.keychain. That's a file created on one Mac and then copied to the other Macs you want to encrypt. Now, while this is a fairly good solution, it does mean that you are sharing the same recovery key across multiple machines. And lastly, Apple has built an encryption solution for the voluntarily encrypted. Unlike a number of other full disk encryption vendors, Apple has built a solution where it's very easy for FileVault 2 enabled users to unlock or even decrypt their own machines. Apple's solution is focused on keeping the bad guys out. It's not focused on keeping your authorized users in. And once users figure out how to decrypt themselves, the IT staff who needs to maintain encryption compliance kind of has to chase people. So, Google's Macintosh operations team needed to address those issues. To make a long story short, they succeeded, and have in turn, they've launched an open source project to bring their FileVault 2 solution for enterprise to the greater Mac community. That open source project is Cauliflower Vest. The name itself is an anagram for FileVault Escrow. So, Cauliflower Vest is a solution for MacAdmins who want to use FileVault 2 as a full disk encryption solution for their enterprises. As currently designed, Cauliflower Vest does the following. It allows individual recovery keys to be automatically generated and escrowed for each Mac. It allows FileVault 2 encryption to be force-enabled on a Mac. And it provides secure access to recovery keys for authorized administrators. Cauliflower Vest is a three-part solution with the following components. There's csfde, which is a command line tool which interfaces with Apple's built-in FileVault functionality to activate FileVault 2 encryption on the client Mac. There's a Google App Engine-based service which receives and securely escrows those recovery keys from the client Macs. And there's a GUI client running on those managed Macs, which works with csfde to enable FileVault 2 encryption on the machines, gets the recovery key, and then sends it up to the App Engine-based recovery key service. Now, all three parts were designed by Google to work together, but it is possible for the csfde command line tool to be used completely independently of any server infrastructure. So you can use csfde without worrying about App Engine, without worrying about Google. You can just use it. So, however, before we continue to talk about Cauliflower Vest component parts, I do want to talk briefly about Google's App Engine, as it's the server backend that Cauliflower Vest server end runs on. App Engine is a cloud web application hosting platform. It runs entirely on Google's infrastructure, it lives in Google's data centers, and it is maintained and managed by Google's engineers. App Engine offers automatic scaling for web applications. As demand increases, App Engine will automatically scale to meet it. So that's a nice bonus. As you don't have to worry about, am I allocating enough? Do I have to watch it? No, App Engine will automatically scale. And one of the nicer parts about using App Engine is that it's free to get started. Anyone with a Google account, you got Gmail, you have access to this. You can create an App Engine instance and you can start working with Cauliflower Vest. Now, the level of resources you get with a free instance is likely sufficient for, small-scale testing. But a large-scale enterprise rollout will require enough resources that Google will start charging you for them. Now, to fully understand how the whole Cauliflower Vest package works together, it's best to take a look at csfde first and see how it works. Now, in normal standalone usage, here's how to run csfde and have it enable FileVault 2 encryption on your boot drive. Pardon me just one moment. Now, the disk ID can be obtained by running the disk-util list command and then getting the disk identifier from the list produced. The username in the command is basically the account you want to have enabled. In other words, the account you want to have show up at that pre-boot login screen. And the password is the password for the account being enabled. Now, if the password is supplied as a hyphen, csfde is going to prompt you for the account's password. And one thing to be aware of is the password will be displayed. So make sure you're comfortable with the password showing up on the screen after you enter it. So, after you enter your csfde command and hit enter, the following process then takes place. csfde is going to resolve the disk identifier you have given it into a disk identifier that FileVault 2 can use. csfde then creates a full disk encryption recipe and feeds it, supplying the disk ID, the user credentials, and other static data, and feeds it into Apple's libcsfde dynamic library. csfde then will pass that full disk encryption recipe to Apple's core storage convert disk method. This will initialize the encryption process, though the actual encryption, as with usual FileVault 2, does not begin until the machine actually reboots. So after the encryption is initialized, core storage will then call back to csfde to supply it with information. And this information is going to include the recovery key and the disk ID of the machine that's being encrypted. csfde is going to check both the encryption status and the information that core storage has provided. It'll then exit and display the recovery key and other relevant information to the user. So one important thing to know is if you're using a managed recovery key using FileVault Master.keychain, csfde will recognize this. It will use that managed recovery key and it'll report it in its output. And how it's going to do that is it's going to say, I'm using a keychain-based recovery user. That means I found FileVault Master.keychain. I'm going to use that. And there's no recovery key that's going to be included in the csfde output. So if you're using csfde with FileVault Master.keychain, it'll work just fine. So let's take a look at running csfde from the command line and see how this all works. So first place we're going to go is to terminal. And since all our work's going to be in terminal, let's just make it full screen. So first thing we need to do is get the disk identifier of the boot volume we want to encrypt. And it looks for Macintosh HD that it is disk 0 S2. So let's make a copy of that. And next thing I want to verify is, do I have csfde installed on this machine? So I'm going to go ahead and run which csfde. And there it is. It's in the proper location, which is user local bin csfde. So now that I've got that, I'm going to go ahead and run csfde. Feed in that disk identifier. I'm going to enable the Trouton account. And in this case, I'm going to do the hyphen so you guys can see what it looks like when that happens. So enter password. As it notes, it's going to be visible. I'm using the incredibly secure password of password goes here. Yeah, that's right, really secure. So it's now been fed in, and here's how csfde's output looks. And at this point, it's gone through that process that we just talked our way through. And there is our recovery key down at the bottom. So it's really important if you're running csfde by itself to make a note of the recovery key, because this is the only place you're going to see it. It's not saved anywhere. It's not sent anywhere. If you don't get it here, that's it. This is your one and only chance. So, what the heck? I'll just skip past that. All right. So I'm going to go now that it's ready to go. I'm going to exit out of terminal. Come on, type exit. There we go. And we're going to go ahead and restart. Okay, here we are, back at that pre-boot login screen. Now, since only one account is enabled for FileVault 2 encryption, that's the Trouton account, it's automatically going to be selected. You're just going to come up and it's going to have the password blank already for you. All right, I've entered my password. Encryption is now kicking off.
And I'm going to go into System Preferences, and let's see how it's working. So go into Security and Privacy, FileVault. Says a recovery key has been set, and it's going ahead and encrypting. Once again, not real world speed. So basically, the process I just walked through is exactly the same from FileVault 2's perspective as I would have if I'd gone into System Preferences, FileVault, turned it on from the GUI. I just happened to do it from the command line using a tool that told FileVault 2 exactly what it needed to know. So csfde is working with FileVault 2. It is not a replacement for FileVault 2. Now, since csfde is a command line tool, you can use it in a script to automate initialization of your boot volume's FileVault 2 encryption. Here's an example of an interactive script where the prompts guide the user through the process of enabling a user for use with FileVault 2 and initializing the encryption. Now, I wrote this script. It's available for anyone to use. I'm going to be giving a link to it out at the end of the talk. Now, ultimately, csfde has one function. It starts FileVault 2 encryption of the current boot volume, and it enables a single user account as part of the encryption initiation process. Now, how Google has worked this functionality into an enterprise-grade encryption management tool has to do with how the Cauliflower Vest GUI application leverages csfde on the client side. So let's take a look at that next. Now, to make sure that their Macs are encrypted, Google built a GUI application that works with the csfde tool and the Cauliflower Vest App Engine service. The GUI application does the following. It provides a user-friendly interface for people to encrypt themselves with FileVault 2. It allows FileVault 2 encryption to be force-enabled on a non-encrypted Mac. And it gathers the recovery key from csfde and it sends it on up to the App Engine-based recovery key service. So let's take a look at how that works. So we're going to go ahead and log in. This is an unencrypted machine. And boom. Here's the Cauliflower Vest GUI application popping up and interrupting that login. First thing you're going to get is a warning, and you don't get the option to bypass this. You only get a continue button. Let's go ahead and hit that. And the Cauliflower Vest GUI application makes the assumption that you may have a local account as opposed to a network account. So basically, the first set of username and password is your network credentials to make sure it can log into that recovery key server. The next set is going to be the username and password you're actually using to log into your machine. Now, it could be that these are exactly the same, and your user would just need to enter the same thing twice. But in the event that they're not, you do have that flexibility. So it's applying encryption. It has set it up to the recovery key service. And boom, we're restarting. Now, one thing that's important to note, that happened where the user had no option to get past that. Second, that was self-service. The user didn't have to call the help desk for that. Well, they might have if they've gone, what is this? But if you train your user sufficiently, they can do this on their own. In fact, they should be doing this on their own. This should not be a help desk call. So let's take a look in System Preferences. Go take a look at FileVault, and we're encrypting. And everything's properly set up from FileVault 2's point of view. A recovery key has been set. It's using the individual recovery key. Machine's encrypted. Everything is good to go. And you weren't involved in any of it. So once the Mac has been encrypted, you can also launch the Cauliflower Vest GUI application by running user local bin Cauliflower Vest. Once the application is launched, the user is prompted to log in using that same combination of usernames and passwords that we just saw. And once authenticated, the user can use the GUI application to access the Mac's recovery key, unlock encrypted volumes, or even decrypt their own encrypted boot drive. Now, while the end user can encrypt their own Mac, decrypt their own Mac easily, Cauliflower Vest design ensures that the state of affairs does not continue past the next logout or reboot. Once the Mac is back at the login window, the same functionality that triggered it to run initially is going to kick in again. It'll detect that it's once again running on an unencrypted Mac. It'll again launch over the login window, and it'll force the FileVault 2 encryption of the Mac's boot volume. So this is how you make sure that you're maintaining compliance. If the user decrypts, fine, FileVault 2 allows that. However, next time they go back to the login screen, they have to encrypt themselves again. Now, since encryption is only half of what Cauliflower Vest provides, let's take a look next at the Cauliflower Vest App Engine service. This service acts as a secure repository for the escrowed recovery keys sent from the client Macs and as a central web-based interface for authorized users to look up recovery keys. Now, to log in, first you would go to the address of your organization's App Engine site. After authenticating, you'll be taken to your organization's Cauliflower Vest site. So that makes sure that not just anybody can get in. Only those folks who need to get to the Cauliflower Vest site can get to it. And at the site, you'll have various search options to locate the machine in question. In this example, we're going to be looking up the machine information using the owner username selector. So once the listing for the encrypted Mac comes up, you can click on the volume UUID link shown in the top picture. And once you do that, you'll have access to the selected Mac's recovery key as shown in the picture below. Now, there is one other piece of functionality to be aware of. When you click on that lock and you access that recovery key, the user will be sent an email saying, someone has accessed your recovery key. Now, of course, if the user is working with the help desk and it's like, oh, I'm going to look up, you tell them, I'm going to look up your recovery key, and they get an email shortly thereafter saying, hey, someone looked up your recovery key, not a big cause of worry for the user. But it's 3 o'clock in the morning, they haven't logged into their machine in like a week, they get an email saying, hey, someone looked up your recovery key. Hopefully that will trigger them to go, maybe I should call IT about this. Now, in my working with it, I found that Cauliflower Vest solves the problems that it was built to solve. The main possible downside is that Cauliflower Vest GUI client and server backend is tied to Google's App Engine, and it will likely take some work for most enterprise environments to get it running entirely in-house. Now that said, Google has recognized this, and they've provided some guidance on how to port the Cauliflower Vest server on the project's wiki. As with all open source, if you don't like the solution you currently have, you can take what's provided and use it to roll out your own solution. Now, getting back, getting off of Cauliflower Vest and just getting back to, just FileVault 2 again. Here's some tips I've learned for improving FileVault 2's performance. First, SSDs are awesome with FileVault 2. To give a comparison for how much faster you can encrypt with an SSD, I ran a test in the same 15-inch Core 2 Duo laptop using a 256 gigabyte SSD and a 256 gigabyte regular hard drive. The SSD encrypted in about 30 minutes. The regular hard drive took 4 hours. Decryption showed much the same speed. Now, that's anecdotal evidence. I don't have graphs, I don't have charts, but that's just to give you an idea of how much faster you can encrypt and decrypt using SSDs as opposed to using a regular hard drive. Processors that have built-in AES-NI hardware support provide additional performance improvements to FileVault 2. AES-NI support in the processor improves the speed of applications performing AES encryption and decryption. FileVault 2 uses AES XTS, so it will benefit from having that hardware support built into the processor itself. How much of a boost? It depends on how fast your processor is overall, but it does help. Now, FileVault 2 is an overall better solution than FileVault 1 is. Hopefully, what I've shown you today can convince you of that. But it does not necessarily cover all workplaces' requirements for full disk encryption. Among the things you cannot currently do with FileVault 2 are the following. You cannot use remote management tools at the pre-boot login screen. All current remote management tools require the operating system to be running. The operating system is not running at the pre-boot login screen, so there's no way to run these tools. You cannot use authentication methods other than passwords or passphrases. At this time, the EFI boot environment does not support the use of encryption tokens like smart cards or USB encryption dongles. The only thing it supports at this time is passwords and passphrases. And you cannot set the FileVault 2 pre-boot login screen to display username and password blanks. It only allows for the account icons. Now, I know some folks are saying, well, why not? And part of the reason is that account icons are something that you can account for in EFI relatively easily. It's a finite amount of data. You click on it, you provide the password, and that's it. So all it has to do is, how many do I have? Okay, if someone clicks on it and I do this, and they provide this password, the password will unlock the encryption. Okay, we're going. Having a blank for the username implies a number of things, like the ability to look up an account on a directory service plugin that isn't running. The ability to check with an external directory service. Once again, using a directory service plugin that isn't running. So there's a number of things that right now are not going to work with providing a username and password blank. Now, that said, if you need that, talk to Apple. File it with bugreport.apple.com. They may be able to fix this, but right now, account icons are the only things available. Now, for those folks who want to use FileVault 2 in a government or other heavily regulated environment, be aware that FileVault 2 is not currently certified by the US government's FIPS 140-2 encryption standard. Now, for those of you who have not heard of it before, if you don't mind, I'm just going to read straight off of this. The FIPS 140-2 standard is a security accreditation program for cryptographic modules certified for use in US and Canadian government departments and regulated industries that collect, store, transfer, share, and disseminate sensitive information. Apple is working on FIPS 140-2 encryption certification for Lion's new Common Cryptography Foundation, and that will cover FileVault 2. But the certification process itself takes years to complete. So for those folks saying, why didn't Apple get this done ahead of time? Why isn't Apple getting this done tomorrow? Keep in mind how fast normal governments run. Keep in mind this has to go through 2 governments. It's going to take a while. So if you're planning to deploy FileVault 2 in your regulated Mac environment, make sure it meets your needs first. When in doubt, check with the folks who are responsible for your data protection policies. And make sure that FileVault 2's capabilities meets those requirements that they're setting. However, if your workplace had previously certified FileVault 1 as being acceptable, FileVault 2 should not be a problem. Double check, of course, but it shouldn't be. Now, here's some useful links for FileVault 2, including some links to some topics not discussed as part of today's talk. In particular, using login banners with FileVault 2 and also displaying password notifications with AD. One thing to keep in mind is that the operating system is not running at the pre-boot login screen, so you don't get those little reminders from Active Directory saying, oh, your password's about to expire in 14 days. And you also don't get it because you get passed straight into your account. So I recommend having, either work with your AD administrator to set up an email system for letting people know, oh, your password's going to expire in a couple weeks. You may want to change it. Or using a utility like the one written by my colleague, Peter Bukowinski. He writes a utility called AD-Passmon, which runs inside your user account and tells you when your AD password is going to expire. And here's some links for Cauliflower Vest, including, once again, some topics not discussed as part of today's talk, in particular, user administration. That's all pretty much coming from their wiki. If you're interested in Cauliflower Vest, this is the source of the best information. It's going to be their project's wiki. And here's a link for the interactive script I showed earlier in the talk, where I was answering questions to encrypt a Mac using Cauliflower Vest csfde tool. And for a lot of the information that I was covering in this talk, with the exception, of course, of the Cauliflower Vest information since that came out later, I highly encourage you to pick up the July and August 2011 issues of MacTech magazine. If you don't already subscribe to MacTech and you want these specific issues, contact them at mactech.com. They'll be happy to sell you back issues. And last but not least, as promised, here are the download links. So I have it as both PDF and also the keynote slides that I've just been speaking from. All are available from those links. And I'm going to leave that up on the screen and open the floor up for questions. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah. Is that on?
Can you go over installing the I'm not going to get the acronym right. The CFDE, the command line interface for Cauliflower Vest?
The csfde tool, that is actually described pretty well on the Cauliflower Vest wiki site. In general, you will need to compile that from source. And from there, it'll need to go into user local bin csfde. Now, you can have it somewhere else, but the correct default location is user local bin csfde. And there are instructions on the Cauliflower Vest wiki on how to compile it.
I'm curious as to know whether it's possible to deploy a csfde non-interactive script with a password that is hashed for a local admin account that might be on all machines?
That is a good question. To the best of my knowledge, it would have to be in the clear. So, make allowances for that. As far as I'm aware, it does not accept a hashed password, but test it out.
Well, you could echo decryption that.
Yeah, I mean, in my script, it didn't get reflected up in my script. So if you're doing it that way, you can set it up so it's not echoing it back to the screen. However, if you want a non-interactive script where, say, like a first boot script, as far as I'm aware, that password would have to be in the clear. But, test it out. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm always happy to be wrong.
2 questions, please. Do you have any experience of using tools like DiskWarrior with whole disk encryption? Specifically, if you've run the security and disk-util commands to unlock things, sometimes DiskWarrior mounts and unmounts the disk multiple times. Does it work flawlessly? Do you have any experience?
In my experience, if your drive is having problems, I would recommend decrypting it before working on it with disk tools other than disk utility.
But does it stay that way if since DiskWarrior sometimes will unmount it to work on it itself?
If it unmounts...
Or at least it unmounts it from the Finder. I think it unmounts it completely.
You know what? To be honest, I have not tested that.
Okay.
So it may work, it may not. I simply haven't tested it.
And my other question is, do you have experience on working with either partition disks or machines with multiple disks?
Yes, partition disks should work okay. You're thinking of something like Boot Camp?
No, I'm thinking if you've got multiple HFS plus partitions.
Yeah, core storage works on a per partition basis, so you can have both. Basically, as long as you're encrypting one whole partition, it should be fine. You can have both. You can have multiple FileVault 2 encrypted partitions on the same physical hard drive.
But FileVault 2 will only automatically decrypt the boot volume. If you want to have a system where you've got the operating system here and the user's home directory on a separate partition.
Yeah, I don't recommend that. And the reason is that everything may not work correctly and mount properly at the right times. So I don't recommend that. Mm-hmm. I did have someone ask me about that where they wanted to have the boot drive unencrypted, but the user partition encrypted.
That's called FileVault 1.
Well, no, I'm talking. They actually partitioned it off and then used like the disk. There is a way to encrypt your disk without using, going through system preferences. There are commands for that, and they wanted to set it up that way. And I'm like, I'm not sure quite that'll work. So it may work if your user data is on the unencrypted partition, but at that point, what are you protecting?
Okay, thank you.
Hey, couple of questions. How does the FileVault 2 work with RAID?
It doesn't.
Okay, good to know.
Okay, here's why. With Apple's software RAID, it will not allow the creation of the Recovery HD tool. Now, with hardware RAID, it is possible that if you had if you're using like Apple's RAID card, it is possible that if you had like a JBOD array that you could use it to dynamically just kind of mush it into a RAID 5, in which case the Recovery HD partition should survive intact in that case, and it may work. But if your software can detect, basically if FileVault 2 can detect it's on a RAID, it's not going to start. So, and it'll even tell you that. It'll go to start and be like, oh, I'm on a RAID, I can't. Or it'll say, I can't find, basically it'll give you the error that says, I can't find Recovery HD. So the reason Apple did that was to make sure that they could guarantee the integrity of the encrypted data. And with a RAID, you can pull a drive out. So they couldn't guarantee that, so they decided, we're simply not going to support RAIDs. Gotcha. So if you need RAID, you may be looking at FileVault 1, which, stinks, but what can you do?
Okay. Another question is you talked about for a Cauliflower Vest. You talked about buying the Google app support. Mm-hmm. We use, and you may not know this, and maybe someone else in the room does. We subcontract their mail out to Google.
Okay.
Does that mean we've already paid for that for app
You
space?
may have, and this is going to be a lot of folks. What it is basically using Cauliflower Vest. A lot of times just comes down to trust in Google. Do you?
evil.
No. Hear me out. Hear me out. A number of enterprises are like, it's on somebody else's it's in somebody else's data center. We have no control over it. The only interface we have with it is basically this web front end. Who knows what they're doing out on the back end? Now, if you're trusting them with your email, chances are you trust them enough to also handle your recovery keys as well. So in that case, you may just need to, this Cauliflower Vest would essentially just be one more application you're hosting with them. Now, would you have additional charges for that? I don't know. You'd have to talk to Google.
Right.
But it's a lot of, App Engine, using App Engine with Cauliflower Vest, the solution works. But for a lot of folks, it's just, do we trust Google enough to let them take care of our recovery keys?
Cool. What CPUs are supported by? You're talking about the CPU, the encryption enhancement.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question?
The ESNI, like what Macs have that, or what?
It can depend. You want to check closely the specifications for your particular models. And the reason I know that is that about a year ago, when I started working with FileVault 2, I was buying a new laptop. And I wanted a 13-inch. And I wound up spending a couple extra $100 for the i7 model, because the i7 had AES-NI and the i5 didn't. Now, that doesn't mean the i5s don't have it. Some do. So it's one of those things that if you want to make sure you have it, check the specs for your particular machine. Check the processor, that particular processor, to see whether it's there. It may be in the Apple, if you look it up on Apple's site, it may list it. Then again, it may not. You may actually have to go look up the processor specs. In my case, I actually wound up going to Intel's site just to double check. So, like I said, it definitely helps with FileVault 2 encryption. If you want to get the most maximum performance for encryption and decryption, SSDs, AES-NI supported.
One other thing, and I'll hand the mic off. You or anyone else have any experience with how if this is sort of FERPA compatible?
If it's what?
FERPA compatible.
FERPA. I have not run into FERPA. What is FERPA?
Oh, shoot.
Oh, it's that kind of thing.
The Buckley Amendment is what it is, but it's
like certain countries producing. Is that what you're talking about?
no, it's HIPAA, basically HIPAA for higher education, for education.
When you're talking the law, your mileage may vary. So once again, I recommend checking with the folks who are in charge of your data protection policies and seeing what they say. If they don't know, ask who they ask. If they don't know, ask who they ask. That kind of thing. It's one of those, it really depends on the particular law.
Right.
So, that's one of those things why FIPS certification is so important. A lot of folks just say, if it's FIPS 140-2 validated and certified, it's great. If it's not, forget about it. So, like I said, check with your data protection folks.
Who wants this next?
Yeah, I might have missed this. So if you have an AD environment and we force users to change passwords every 60 days, so they're always calling the help desk for resets, and you're doing the managed scenario, are you giving them the managed key over the phone? Is that what you're giving them?
No, I mean, actually AD is kind of nice. FileVault 2 is nicer about this than FileVault 1 was. FileVault 2 is nicer about this than FileVault 1 was, because FileVault 2 will get updates from your directory service plugin. So in the event, this is the way it should work. So someone's AD password changes. They bring their laptop, it's going to keep using their old password at the pre-boot login screen until the next time they come in and plug into the network. And basically the next time that they need to authenticate against AD, when basically your directory service gets the news, oh, there's a new password, I should use that. It also feeds it back to FileVault 2 to say, oh, there's a new password, you need to use that. That's the way it should work. Now, there's a couple ways to force this update. If the user is an administrator, just have them go, once they're connected up and able to talk to your domain controller, have them go click a lock. That'll force, password authentication. It'll go back and talk to AD and update that password, in which case, once again, it will get fed back to FileVault 2. If they're not an administrator, what I recommend is they log in and then do a regular logout to the regular login screen, because you can do that. They go, they log in with the regular username and the new password. That'll also get fed back to FileVault 2. And at that point, FileVault 2 at the preboot login screen will just use that new password.
Thanks.
My question is on the guest account
Okay.
at the pre-boot login. Is there a way to force that on if you're not using iCloud?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really tied into iCloud and Find My Mac. Without it, it's not there.
Because I have it set up with the profile manager where you can remotely lock and wipe, and I still don't get it. Or is it?
Yeah, it's not going to be there except unless you enable Find My Mac. That's the way it turns on. Sorry. Actually, you know, when is this session over? Because I'm losing track of time.
4 minutes.
4 minutes? Okay, so let's get some quick questions in if people have them. So who's next?
With FileVault Master.keychain, have you ever been able to use a certificate from a real CA instead of a self-signed?
No. The reason is that this is something that basically Apple has specifically for FileVault. I have never been able to use another organization. Basically, I have not been able to use an outside CA. This is something that the Mac itself needs to generate. Now, you can then take that and copy it off to multiple machines, and the other machines will use that just fine, but it does need to be generated from the Mac itself.
Is there a way to figure out whether or not the system's encrypted with an individual key or an institution key other than through the GUI?
Sorry, other than what?
Through the GUI in system preferences.
The best and most reliable way is going to be through the GUI. On a default 10.7 install, like new, it wasn't upgraded, there shouldn't be FileVault Master.keychain inside of library keychains. So those would be the two places I would look, is the GUI, and if you know it's a new 10.7 install, check library keychains for FileVault Master Keychain.
Right. Well, what I'm worried about is people with 10.6 systems that have upgraded.
Yeah, in that case, your best option for figuring that out is going to be the GUI. Now, it'll show up no matter, that information will show up no matter what account you're logged in as. So, if you log in as the administrator account, you can go into FileVault and see what the recovery key is reporting.
Okay.
And also, if you have the FileVault Master Keychain there before encryption, it'll just automatically use that. It won't give you the option for the individual recovery key.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Any more questions? All right, well, thank you all for coming. Please don't forget to fill out your feedback forms. Leave them in the box in the back. And please, 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 take some candy.